When in Melbourne, the easiest way to see the city is on the 35 tram. This travels all the way around the city, and what's more, it's free. This is Melbourne's beautiful 19th century old Treasury building. Was designed in 1857. This grand building was Melbourne's General Post Office. Post office was closed in 1993 and is now an H&M megastore containing some of the biggest names in the international and Australian fashion. Block Arcade was built between 1891 and 1893. With period details including a mosaic floor and a central dome. Melbourne's most opulent arcade was named after the promenade taken by fashionable society in the 1890s, known as Doing the Block. The walk involved strolling down Collins Street between Elizabeth and Swanston Streets. If you're feeling a bit thirsty, then why don't you pop into the famous Hoton Tea Rooms, which has been in place since the structure was opened. The altar screen, made in Italy from marble and alabaster, inset with glass mosaics. The original 1866 flooring also enhances the cathedral. When in Melbourne, you must go to Fitzroy Gardens. James Sinclair was the head gardener when these superb formal gardens were first laid out, featuring follies, winding paths, a fern gully and avenues of elms. This cottage was the English home of the parents of Captain James Cook. It was shipped to Australia in 1934 piece by piece and now houses displays about Cook and the 18th century life. As Melbourne is a cosmopolitan city, this is Chinatown, and the Chinese settlers came to Australia in 1818. Regent Theatre was known as Melbourne's Palace of Dreams. Its lavish interiors emulated both the glamour of Hollywood and New York's impressive Capitol Theatre.
We're now about to go into Melbourne Jail.
Visiting the old Melbourne Jail, Victoria's first extensive jail complex, is a chilling experience, especially on a night tour. Between 1845 and 1929, it was the site of 133 executions. While much of the original complex has been demolished, the imposing second cell block still stands and is home to a fascinating museum. Ghosts are often reported at the jail. The Royal Arcade is Melbourne's oldest surviving arcade. It is part of a network of lanes and arcades which sprung up to divide the big blocks of the city grid into smaller segments. The most famous inhabitants are statues of Gog and Magog, mythical representatives of the conflict between the ancient Britons and the Trojans. This is the State Library, with neoclassic Corinthian columns line the facade at the front of the building. Inside is an attractive octagonal reading room, covered by the central dome. Queen Victoria would probably not be too amused if she saw her statue looking out on this tower called the Eureka Tower. This 300-metre tower was named after the Eureka Stockade, a rebellion that took place during the Victorian Gold Rush. We're now entering the Latch Gate, which is the entrance to the Royal Botanic Gardens of Melbourne. These adjoining gardens, established in 1852 from the green heart of Melbourne, on which was originally a swamp on the edge of the city. The Botanic Garden houses one of the finest collections of botanic species in the world, as well as being highly regarded for their landscape design. This view shows Government House. This elaborate Italianate building is a landmark of the gardens. The ornamental lake forms the centerpiece of the garden to reflect the 18th century English garden design. This part of the garden is an arid garden. Desert region plants from Australia and around the world thrive in this spectacular garden, watered by a small stream which acts as a natural oasis. This spectacular redevelopment of Melbourne's Dockland makes it well worth visiting for the modern architecture alone. The Great Ocean Road is one of the world's greatest scenic drives. Close to Melbourne, pretty holiday towns are linked by curving roads with striking views at every turn. Aireys Inlet. The red and white lighthouse is a landmark of this tiny coastal town with its beautiful ocean views. We're now at Apollo Bay. Fishing is the main activity here, and fishing trips can be taken from the town's wharf. The town itself has a relaxed village atmosphere and excellent restaurants. Between Port Campbell and Port Fairy is a landscape of rugged cliffs and swirling seas. The giant eroded monoliths, the 12 Apostles. These are situated in Port Campbell National Park, are an awesome spectacular to see. Hunt. There, to the left. there's two. There's one to the right of them. Here's one of them.
Oh, one's jumping straight through this cue caravan park, usually they're a little bit lower.
As time moves on, so do we, and unfortunately we have to go. So we'll be getting a flight this evening from Melbourne to Sydney, and then tomorrow we'll be flying back to the UK.